She was claimed by a child princess when she was small enough to be named. She grew into one of the largest dragons of her generation, and when the war came for her house, her rider chained her in a horse stable and fed her from the king's stores, because the sharpest weapon in the queen's hand was the one she could not bring herself to raise. Welcome to Westeros Within, where we journey into forgotten ages, hidden legends, and ancient mysteries. This is Dragons of Westeros, Episode 9, Syrax, the dragon who never chose war. The stories say she hatched on Dragonstone in the years before the Realm's Delight learned to walk. In 104 after the conquest, a girl of 7 climbed onto a yellow dragon on the cliffs of the island fortress and gave her a name from the scripture of old Valyria. Syrax, the name of a goddess, a glyph whose meaning was simply good. Rhaenyra Targaryen was 7 years old. From that afternoon on the Black Stones until a riot in King's Landing 26 years later, the two of them would not be parted. Every memory written into the yellow dragon was a memory of Rhaenyra. Every claw that closed on a saddle closed on hers. She was yellow, not gold, not cream. Yellow like morning sun on a shield. In an age of bronze vermithor and blood-red Caraxes and pale blue dreamfire, the yellow she-dragon stood apart at a glance. A year after the claim, Rhaenyra was summoned before the lords of Westeros and named heir to the Iron Throne. 700 lords bent the knee to a girl of 8. They called her the Realm's Delight, and for a long, peaceful stretch of the reign of Viserys I, the princess and her yellow dragon were the image of the Targaryen succession. In those years, Syrax grew. She grew through the marriage of Alicent Hightower into the royal bed, and through the birth of the half-brothers who would one day hate her rider's name. She grew through Rhaenyra's marriage to Sir Laenor Velaryon, and through the birth of 3 dark-haired boys the court whispered about in the corners of the Red Keep. And as she grew, she laid clutches of eggs on the black sands of Dragonstone, many of them enough that fire and blood marks her as one of the great mothers of the second-generation dragons. The cradle dragons of Rhaenyra's sons were almost certainly her children. Vermax, given to Jacaerys, Arrax, given to Lucerys, Tyraxes, given to little Joffrey. Later, perhaps, Morning and Moondancer and Stormcloud, a whole generation of dragons in the line of one yellow mother on Dragonstone. She was, in a sense, the matriarch of the war to come. Then the year of the Red Spring took everything. Laenor Velaryon was killed in a market brawl on Driftmark. Harwin Strong burned alive in Harrenhal with his father. Rhaenyra, widowed and shamed, retreated to Dragonstone and took Syrax with her. Half a year later, she married her own uncle, Prince Daemon Targaryen, in secret on the island where she had first claimed her dragon. For the rest of Viserys' long reign, Syrax was a creature of Dragonstone, waiting with her rider for a war everyone knew was coming. And then Viserys I died. The Greens moved before the ink on the ravens was dry. Aegon II was crowned in the sept of the Red Keep. Word reached Dragonstone and broke Rhaenyra's body as surely as her spirit. 8 months into a pregnancy, she fell into a black labour and bore a daughter already dead, already deformed, her little monster Visenya. She was crowned Queen of the Blacks in the same chamber where the child was lost. The dance of the dragons had begun. And here is the strangest truth of Syrax's life. Through most of the war that consumed her rider's house, the yellow dragon did not fight. Lucerys was sent to Storm's End on Arrax, one of Syrax's own children if the stories are true, and Vhagar tore him out of the sky above Shipbreaker Bay. Rhaenyra did not rise from her bed for days. Syrax did not fly. Caraxes fought at Harrenhal and in the Riverlands, and Daemon bathed his scales in blood. Meleys, the Red Queen, fought and fell at Rook's Rest. Seasmoke fought at Tumbleton. Vermax, another child of the yellow she-dragon, fought and died in the Battle of the Gullet. Syrax did not fly. She was kept, fed from stores, guarded, cherished. A dragon in her prime who had borne the next generation of her kind, who could have ended a battle in a single afternoon, held back from the sky by a mother who had already lost too much to risk losing more. The chroniclers noted this with something close to disbelief. The sharpest weapon the Queen owned, she would not draw. And then King's Landing fell to her. With Sunfire grievously wounded in the ashes of Rook's Rest, with Aemond and Vhagar riding far from the capital, Rhaenyra finally mounted Syrax and led her dragon riders across the narrow sea. Caraxes flew at her side. Together they circled Aegon's high hill, and the small folk below stared up at a yellow dragon most of them had not seen since their childhood. The city panicked. The Green's last loyalists collapsed, and Syrax carried Rhaenyra down through the smoke into the courtyard of the Red Keep she had not seen in nearly a decade. Within days, her rider sat the Iron Throne, and the yellow dragon was led not to the Dragonpit on the Hill of Rhaenys, but to a horse stable in the outer ward of the Red Keep. The horses were cleared away. Heavy chains were fastened to her legs, long enough that she could move from stable to yard, but not long enough to let her take the sky without a rider. Meat was brought to her from the royal stores. She did not hunt. She had not hunted for herself in years. She was, the chroniclers wrote, exceedingly well fed. Rhaenyra had brought her dragon into the capital and chained her in a stable like a prized mare. And then the city turned. The half-year of Rhaenyra's reign bled support from the moment it began. Taxes, executions, an emptied treasury. The whispers that had once called her the realm's delight now called her King Maegor with teats. Queen Helaena, already broken by the murder of her own small son, threw herself from a tower of the Red Keep and was impaled on the iron spikes below. The rumour ran through Flea Bottom that Rhaenyra had ordered it done. That night, a one-handed prophet, the history's name only the Shepherd, raised a mob in Cobbler's Square and turned them toward the Hill of Rhaenys. His sermon was simple: the dragons were demons. King's Landing would not be saved until the last of them lay dead. Tens of thousands marched. Within the Red Keep, a boy of 13 heard that the Dragonpit was breaking and that his own dragon was inside it. Prince Joffrey Velaryon, Rhaenyra's youngest Velaryon son, slipped past his mother's guards and into the stable in the outer ward. Without a saddle, without a whip, without his mother's leave, without ever having ridden her before in his life. He unchained Syrax and climbed onto her bareback, meaning to fly to the Dragonpit and save Tyraxes. The yellow dragon did not know him. She rose. 200 feet above Flea Bottom, she twisted in the air and threw him. He fell onto the steep roof of a house, and the tiles broke his back, and his own sword tore free of its sheath and pierced his belly as he struck the cobbles below, and Syrax was loose in the sky above King's Landing for the first time in years. She could have stayed on high. Archmaester Gildane marks this as the most inexplicable choice in her whole life. She could have remained above the reach of spears and crossbows and made runs upon the mob with her fire, as any dragon of the old wars would have done. Instead, she was drawn by the blood and the noise and the burning torches, and she descended to ground level, and she went at the mob the way a stabled animal goes at meat. Teeth and claws and close quarters. She killed dozens of men, and then men killed her. How? No one can say for certain. Grand Maester Muncan wrote that Hob the Hewer, the woodsman who had felled Shrykos with 7 axe strokes named for the 7, climbed the yellow dragon and struck her down with the same blade. Septon Eustace told a holier story, that Syrax was slain by a blood-soaked giant, or the warrior himself wearing the shape of a man who leapt onto her back and drove a spear through her. Mushroom, the Queen's lecherous fool, swore it was Sir Warwick Wheaton with a lost Valyrian steel sword, most likely the blade called Lamentation, who cut a wing from the yellow dragon and left her grounded for the mob. 3 chroniclers, 3 stories. The truth, as Gildane himself admits, is lost to us. What is certain is this: The dragon who had worn Rhaenyra's weight for 26 years, who had circled the Red Keep in triumph only months before, who had mothered the war dragons of the next generation, died that night on the Hill of Rhaenys alongside 4 of her own kin: Dreamfire, Shriekos, Morgul, and her son Tyraxes. 5 dragons in a single night, and her rider was not there to see it. When word reached Rhaenyra, the histories say she collapsed. Within days, she fled the city she had taken on Syrax's back. Less than a month later, she was handed to her half-brother Aegon on the shores of Dragonstone and fed alive to his crippled golden dragon Sunfire, while her surviving son was made to watch. In a way, Sunfire only finished what the mob had started. Syrax is the quiet tragedy of the dance, a dragon kept too precious to risk, a weapon sheathed until the war was almost won, the one great dragon of her age who never truly fought a battle with her rider on her back, and who then died in the only battle her rider did not choose. A gentle dragon in a war that demanded teeth. So tell me this, if Rhaenyra had flown Syrax to Rook's Rest instead of Meleys, do you think the yellow she-dragon would have burned Vhagar out of the sky? Write it in the comments. And if you want more stories from the dragons of Westeros, the ones who rose before our history and the ones who died after, subscribe to Westeros Within and join me for the next chapter. Because next time, we follow the Scarlet Red Queen, who flew for 2 princesses. The dragon whose pink wings caught the light over King's Landing, who carried Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen into the trap at Rook's Rest, and who killed one of the dragons that ambushed her there before the weight of Vhagar came down upon her neck. Her name was Meleys, and when she fell, the red of her wings was the last colour King's Landing would ever see.